We see your slide now. Thanks.
You listen. Audio is good? Very good?
Very loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Nikos Paragios. I'm Distinguished Professor of Mathematics at Université Paris-Saclay, and I'm also the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Therapanasia. I would like to thank Human Bytes for bringing this webinar live. There is a slight modification on the title of the webinar, but the content will be essentially the same. The idea will be actually to explore how artificial intelligence, how machine learning can actually bring the power of automation to radiotherapy, starting from contouring, which actually it's a basic tool of process, going all the way to the next level, which is planning, and most importantly, how we can actually implement adaptive radiotherapy at scale. That's going to be the objective. This is my conflicts of interest, which consist both of being stockholder, of course, of Therapanasia as a CEO and founder, but also other companies, as well as partnerships and collaborations. A little bit presentation of the challenge. I mean, I think most of the people in this webinar, they are very familiar with cancer treatment. Today, we expect that by 2030, there will be 30 million new cases. Among these 30 million new cases, there are going to be approximately 15 million which actually will not make it as of today, given the current standard of care. And as of today, approximately 50 to 60% will receive radiotherapy, either standalone treatment or in combination with other treatments, which means that we have to deliver approximately 15 million patients treatment in 2030. If you go from something between 5 to 30 fractions, that will generate most likely something between 500 million of radiotherapy sessions or 150, depending on how many we're doing. Radiotherapy today actually requires two components. Of course, there is a linear hardware accelerator and there's the software. This is where we are. Actually, software is the tool that is used as kind of autopilot of the accelerator. And this software actually is used to deliver or decide what is the best possible treatment, which then effectively is implemented by the accelerator. What are the main challenges of radiotherapy today? If we look actually in the practice, not that many things have changed over the past 30 years. Actually, radiotherapy consists, as of today, in two stages. The first stage is what we call planning, and the second stage is treatment delivery, which is in the process of changing with adaptive radiotherapy. In the planning, usually what we'll do is we're going to try to build a digital twin of the patient from the CT scan or the MR scan. We're going to try to simulate what is the best possible treatment plan. And once we feel confident enough, we're going to bring the patient in and we're going to try to deliver the treatment in a number of fractions. If we look today on the whole workflow of radiotherapy, both in terms of planning preparation as well as treatment delivery, there are many challenges. The first one is time consuming, whether we're talking about creating the digital twin, which consists of contouring organs at risk and the target node, whether we're talking for planning, QA, and simulation, this takes too much time than compared to what should be acceptable, given the number of machines and the number of people to be treated. The second challenge we have today is actually there's a strong expert bias, and this is not only for the contouring, but this is through the whole workflow, whether we're talking into planning, whether we're talking into adaptive treatment decisions. Every center or every physician in general will do things differently depending on his own her expertise. And this bias actually is propagated to the patient, which is not good. The third thing, which today actually is also a challenge in radiotherapy, and this is where adaptive comes in, is that anatomical changes are not taken into consideration. Which means that we make the assumption that actually patient anatomy will not change throughout the treatment. This is a case for more like 95% of the cases. When you make this assumption, the only way to compensate with the reality is by adding margins to the tumor radiation, which means that you're going to actually increase the toxicity of the treatment. And this is not good for the patient. This is not good for the organs at risk. But this is what we're doing because we're not able to effectively implement anatomical changes into consideration. If we go even further, we still use the hypothesis that actually one tumor is equal to one dose. That means that we don't try to differentiate how the tumor can be aggressively locally. And this reflects on increased toxicity on tumors where, for example, like brain, a large portion of the tumor has been already in a state of necrosis, and there is no really need of increased radiation on this area. And of course, what is even more surprising is that at no point in radiotherapy we're looking into outcomes. That means we have all this data for which patients have been treated. We know the plans. We have the follow-up of these patients, we have the outcomes, but we don't try to understand or reason actually why some patients are responding better than others. And all these things, it's kind of surprising in a domain where actually data is available, data is curated, and usually patients will come back at some point for a second treatment. What machine learning can bring in, I think machine learning is something that is radically changing radiation oncology. And the reason is because we have high quality, good quality data on all the steps of the process. The first thing it can bring in is actually time saving. I mean, I think we should be able both to prepare plans as well as to deliver treatments in a faster period of time. That is essential, especially due to the lack of resources and the increasing number of patients to be treated. The second objective of machine learning is actually automation, standardization. Today, as I said before, each hospital has its own practices. These practices can even vary within the hospital, and these practices heavily depend on the expert because there will be different people looking into the same case. AI is a tool, machine learning is a tool if it's properly done to actually address these limitations. And even if we go further, something that humans today are not able to do, at some point AI will bring in also optimal outcomes. So what we could expect by the adoption of the AI in general, whether this is the work we have been doing or whether this is the work that's done by other companies and other vendors, is that we should improve treatment efficacy, we should reduce side effects, we should be able to increase the number of patients being treated with the same infrastructure through automation, and eventually we should reduce the cost that we are spending. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the company. We are actually a 75 people company based in headquarters in Paris, but we have offices in Athens, in Lyon, in Montpellier, and in the United States. The company is a class 2 medical device. That means that we're building software of medium to high risk, which positions us at the same level of excellence and the same level of obligations like a treatment planning solution. Our vision is that in order to be able to innovate, you need to have the right people. So the company today has more than 35% of our people with a PhD in medical physics, in machine learning, and applied mathematics. But we also believe that in order to be able to innovate, you have to work with the best clinical centers and be able to actually understand the best practices and use physicians in the loop so you are able to deliver products. And to that perspective, we have been building collaborations with almost any flagship center in Europe and in the United States. The company today is in 5 continents, and we expect that by 2024, there's going to be 250,000 patients that will go through our service. The company has been around for almost 6 years, and again, I'm going to spend no time in this slide. We're starting with automatic annotation of organs at risk. We introduced a tool that allows you to do deformable and linear registration between images coming from same and different modality. On 2021, we're the first company to propose a full MR-based dosimetry, which consists of actually contouring organs at risk and at the same time generating a deep learning synthetic CT. At that time was for pelvis and brain. On 2022, we introduced a DAP box that we're going to focus today. On 2023, we introduced CCBCD box, which is a tool that allows you to, using generative AI, to take your complete CT and create a diagnostic CT quality. And what now is pending for clearance and hopefully will be approved before the end of the year is actually our first fully automated solution for automatic planning. Not going to spend time on it. So I'm going to try to give you a very short overview of the things that you know, and then I'm going to focus on the things that you don't know, which is adaptive treatment and the optimized, automatized plan delivery without physician in the loop. So let's try to talk about automation. Automation is one of the critical aspects of radiotherapy due to the lack of people, due to the lack of consistency across centers, and due also to the lack of highly qualified personnel between centers. I'm not going to spend that much time. This is a product that we have been pushing in the market for many, many years now. The idea is to use what we call geometrically and anatomically preserving deep learning for automatic annotation of organs at risk. Today, we're able to support both CT and MR. We're able to segment all the organs at risk, including lymph nodes for all the areas. And according to most of the studies, this product is to be to state of the art. It's vendor-agnostic, it's indication agnostic, and can support all anatomies. I'm just going to point out a recent study that was published a year ago from the German Oncology Center. Actually, they did a comparison across the vendors at that time. Please take into consideration that vendor performance can change because these are models that are trained over time. What is important to demonstrate in this study that we are not part of the study. Actually, we just produced results and they were analyzed independently from German Oncology Center. that depending on the solution you are using, you might be able to save between 80 to 96% of your time. That means that this automation, this deep learning actually is making a difference. Of course, when you present a paper, usually you are among the most performing solutions, which was the case. In our case, in average, almost 90% of the time was saved by using as a start point the contours we're providing, and then using physician's time just for verification and correction. This was published in Frontiers of Oncology last year, I think a year ago. Now the question is, once you have addressed the question of organs at risk, what we're doing about tumor. So this is part of the coming release. We start working on actually automatic target volume delineation. This is the first product that will come in the market, focusing on brain tumors. This is glioblastoma and multiple leukometastases. The idea of the product is actually to be able automatically to generate a 3D volume of the tumor without the user in the loop, and then eventually the physician can adjust that. So this product today has what we call a dice coefficient of almost 90%, which is much higher than what you usually will get when we're looking into physicians' consensus. And again, this is just an example of how the product works. Again, you are pushing automatically the MR scan, and then you are getting a 3D mask corresponding to the tumor volume. And this is the case for glioblastoma and all multiple metastases. These are usually easy tumors because you see them on the MR very well, on the magnetic resonance. What happens when we start looking into tumors that are more complex, which is the case of head and neck? And there, what is happening in general is the main challenge is that you don't have high quality ground truth to build high quality models. So this is something that we have addressed by working with Gustave Roussy and Léon Bérard. The idea here was actually to radically change the way we actually create ground truth. So instead of relying on images where you don't really see the tumor, what we did is we used patients coming from a complete laryngectomy, for which actually we had the biological specimen. We sliced the biological specimen. We actually contour the tumor on the biology, and this is something that you can easily do. Dice coefficient was almost 98% across physicians. And then you use the deep learning to transfer this information to CT scans. And this is what you are seeing here. So you are able to generate a method that is able to synthesize how the tumor will look on CT by using actual ground truth. And when you do that, then the next thing is actually to build a segmentation model. So the first observation is that in general, tumor delineation on CT at least is 25% higher in terms of volume compared to the actual tumor as seen in histology. So the physicians, they tend to over-segment the tumor in general, but even by over-segmenting the tumors, very often substantial amount of the tumor is not taken into consideration. So this is a prototype that is going to go to the next release, focusing on head and neck, where we're able to get a 75% dice coefficient on high-quality ground truth, which is already exceptional. Because on a study that we did with Gustave Roussy and Léon Bérard, the average consensus between physicians was close to 59%. So we do expect that there's going to be more and more added value in the process by adding tumor delineation, which actually is the most important thing in terms of treatment toxicity, and that's where we are pushing our efforts. Assuming that the problem is solved, automatic segmentation of organs at risk and target volumes. Now the question, what is next in terms of automation? There are two things. The first one is what we call auto planning. Is there a way of actually do the same thing as we did for auto segmentation to treatment delivery? Is there a way that I can teach a system not only to provide me a digital twin of the patient, but also provide me at the same time an actual plan that is deliverable, goes through the QA, and take into account the accelerator parameters? And that was the focus of the research that we have been doing for the past 2-3 years, and it seems that it's feasible. So the way we approach the problem is very different compared to any existing approach in the market. Most of the existing approach of the market, what they are doing is usually they're relying on to what we call dose to volume histograms. That means that they will compress the optimization of the machine sequence into a problem where we try to figure out how the dose delivered to an organ and the tumor is actually compared with what is the target. So instead of doing that, we say that it will make more sense that instead of focusing on dose to volume histograms, which are global measurements that do not take into account the volumetric consideration of the tumor distribution, how about try to use the whole dose map as a constraint? This is where deep learning comes in. in order to be able to determine what is actually the dose that you like to deliver, the first you want to be able to guess. So using a massive amount of annotations, what we did is we built a model that is able to synthesize. I mean, we are not producing any plan at the first stage. We are able to synthesize what is going to be likely the dose distribution in terms of volumetric and in terms of voxels for a patient, given his anatomy or her anatomy, given and given the prescription. So this is just what we call an image synthesis problem. What we are trying to do is we try to understand how you can relate imaging to dose distribution. So this is just a pure machine learning problem. You learn to synthesize the dose of a patient given actually what is the anatomy. This is a CT scan. What is the target volume? This is the contouring of the target volume, and what are the organs at risk. So what you are seeing here is actually the first step of the process, is where we're having for the same patient the dose that was used to treat the patient. So this is what you're seeing on the second row. This is the ground truth. And what you are seeing on the third row is actually what actually our algorithm is predicting, which is a dose that we do believe, even if we don't have the second row, that this is the dose that we should deliver. And when we are checking our capacity on predicting the dose, this is just the dose synthesis. It seems that for a substantial number of cases, this is the case for prostate, actually we are pretty good. That means the system is able to understand what is the relationship between imaging, organs at risk, and prescription, and what is dose distribution. That means that we're doing pretty good job on actually being able to determine, without any dose optimization, what is the dose that the physician will end by delivering with his own plan. Once you have done that, then the next objective is actually to use as a constraint. So this is our auto-planning solution. It consists of taking as constraint the distribution of the dose volumetrically that actually was guessed, and then try to fit to this dose a real plan, which means a real sequence of the accelerator, which will allow us actually to deliver this dose. So this is a standard optimization problem, where instead of looking into one-dimensional constraints, as was the case before using dose volume histograms, now we try to optimize voxel by voxel the dose distribution given the dose that have been guessed and the dose that the machine can deliver. And the outcome here is a fully deliverable plan that goes through QA and this actually follows the constraints that are imposed by the accelerator, given a prescription. So the input is going to be a prescription and a CT scan of the patient. The output will be a fully deliverable QA plan that can be imported to any system to be delivered, where the physician can choose what kind of accelerator he would like to use. And this is just an example on this is a retrospective case where we have on the left-hand side what was the dose distribution that was delivered by the physician. This is the actual plan. And then what you are seeing on the right-hand side is the dose distribution that the auto-planning fully delivered without any actually interaction with the physician. Now we are supporting more than 5 prescriptions in prostate, but the idea is to extend that in other indications like head and neck, which is the immediate target, as well as brain tumors, as well as lungs and breast. So having solved the problem of automation on pre-planning, now the question comes about the delivery. Is there a way that actually we can democratize adaptive radiotherapy and make it effective for every patient? Let's try to see what are the limitations first, because this is going to help us to understand why adaptive radiotherapy is not feasible today. The first reason why it's very complex to implement adaptive is because embedded image quality is not sufficient enough, both in terms of quality, that means how well we are seeing the structures, as well as in terms of coverage. We're only doing imaging of a small part of the tumor. So we have at the same time an image of bad quality of limited field of view, on which it's almost impossible at the same time to estimate what is actual dose delivered and eventually estimate what is the dose that should be delivered. And in practice, while we expect that approximately 25% of the patients should at least benefit of adaptive radiotherapy, today this is constrained to something a fairly small percentage that is almost a tiny fraction of it. So what was the idea? Actually the first is there a way of actually using the latest advances of generative AI? Generative AI is a solution which allows you to synthesize data. That means that you learn from a training set what we call a universal generator that is able to reproduce data of the same statistical behavior as the one that you have on your training set. So the first objective was actually to figure out a way of converting a combined CT to a higher resolution CT by only using deep learning. The idea was to actually transform the image by learning the relationship between a low-resolution signal of COMBIM CT of limited projections and the high-resolution diagnostic CT of the same patient. We use several hundred of thousands of pairs between these two examples, and we train a generator that's able to actually convert your COMBIM CT to a high-resolution CT. The second constraint we had to do dose estimation was actually the ability of seeing the whole field of view. So using one of our existing products, that is deep learning accelerated deformable fusion, we're able to complete the information that was missing from the COMBIM CT, from the planning CT. And the last constraint we had is actually go to a full-scale dose estimation. So we developed on our own deep learning accelerated collapse cone solution that is able within 10 to 15 seconds to provide a full-scale simulation of a head and neck case in terms of dose distribution. So how does the product work? The first component of the product, actually, this is just an example. This is a clinically certified product. What you are seeing on the right-hand side is actually the input signal. What you are seeing there on the left-hand side is the synthetically generated high-resolution COMBIM CT. And what you are seeing in terms of organs at risk, this is actually our automatic annotations that were generated on the synthetically generated COMBIM CT by using our auto-segmentation product. So, and of course, you can project them to the actual COMBIM CT because there is one-to-one correspondence. So the first component consists of synthesizing a high-resolution CT from a low-resolution COMBIM CT and running our auto-segmentation product. Once we have done that, then what we can do is actually we can calculate the dose. So we're able to come up with the actual dose estimation corresponding to the daily anatomy. And on this dose estimation, we're able to determine for every organ at risk what is the dose distribution on the daily basis. We are not deforming the dose. We are not deforming the structures of interest. We are not deforming the tumor. What we are doing is we are using the daily imaging. We are converting the daily imaging into a high-resolution quality image on which we are doing automatic annotation of organs at risk and on which we are doing actual dose estimation on the basis of the plan. So this is the first solution on top of the solutions that allow you today to do online adaptive, which is a case of Unity, Varian from Elekta, is a case from Ethos, from Varian, and it was a case from Urey. So this is the first solution that is vendor agnostic, that is able for any accelerator offline to provide you actually what is going to be the actual dose you are delivering on every day and allows you at the same time to measure how this dose actually is different compared to what you have expect. So you have a tool for automatic decision making. Now let's try. I don't have that much time, so I'm just going to talk also a little bit about the future. So that will conclude in 3 minutes. We said that one of the limitations of radiation therapy is local dose control. Today we are still using the principle one dose or one tumor, one dose. So I'm just going to like to point out 2 of the things that we are doing. There are 2 clinical trials. The first one is a clinical trial for glioblastoma tumors. This is with Gustave Roussy and Pitié Salpêtrière. There will be 30 patients that will participate. The idea here is to be able to actually separate the tumor, the glioblastoma, on different categories, and each category actually can be more or less aggressive. So the idea is to be able to come with an idea on what is the core, what is the enhancing part, what is the proliferating part, and what is the necrosis part. And using this information, what we like to do is we like to adjust the dose by performing boosting in some areas of the dose while decreasing the dose in some other areas. So there will be 30 patients that will be treated with this tool where AI will help us to differentiate within the tumor areas for which we can have different boosting levels of the dose. The second clinical trial we're working, and again, this is again with the same friends. We're working with Gustave Roussy, Professor of Touch, and with Léon Bérard, Professor of Saint-Grégoire, who is a clinical coordinator. The idea here is to go beyond radiotherapy, and this is for head and neck tumors. What we know is that whenever there was a trial between a combination of radiotherapy and immunotherapy, it was unsuccessful. The reason why it was unsuccessful, according to physicians, is because these are 2 antagonistic effects. Radiation therapy is irradiating blood cells. When you're irradiating blood cells, you are reducing the level of lymphocytes. When you're reducing the level of lymphocytes, then immunotherapy will not work. So on this trial, which is going to be a 3-arm trial involving almost 1,000 patients, what we like to do is we like to compare conventional radiotherapy, this is what we are doing here today, with a radiotherapy for which we try to preserve circulating blood by adding additional dose constraints on actually arteries and a reduced toxicity radiotherapy combined with immunotherapy. So there will be 3 levels One will be a standard radiotherapy. A second will be a standard radiotherapy plus immunotherapy with preservation of circulating flow of blood. And the third one will be the reduced dose on radiotherapy plus combined by immunotherapy. So this trial will start next year and is supposed to be completed by 2026 if things goes as well. I would like to close. Machine learning and AI are changing completely, not only radiotherapy, but medicine and society in general. But you have to be cautious that there is no magic. Today, in order to have this method efficient and adopted in the workflow, we have to care about what we call standardization. No machine learning method can train, or we cannot train a method that is able to learn from inconsistent data. This is very important. The second thing, which is very important, especially when we start looking into outcomes, which we're working, but I didn't have the time to present, is the difference between correlation and causality. When you have these models with a lot of parameters and a lot of variables, the probability of finding random things that seem to be connected is very high. So the question is how you can separate what actually creates a causal effect because treatment and disease, and what is actually just a very simple random coherence of events that can happen very often. And the last thing, which is very important, is what we call bias and generalization. When you're a university professor, which used to be my case, when you try to publish something, you just have to show that you are doing very well on the top of the iceberg. When you are building a product, which is also my case now, we try to be as good as we can on the visible part of the iceberg. But the reality, the clinical reality, is actually that 80% of the iceberg is not visible. So your methods, your products, they should take into account that, and you should have a continuous progression of what you are developing by actually pushing more and more examples on your training while maintaining clinical consistency and discussing with physicians. And in order to be efficient, I think that collectively we need to think the big picture. I think it's great that we are able to do perfect auto-contouring, but at some point what does count is the treatment. And the treatment is about toxicity, it's about the tumor, it's about everything. So understanding the whole chain and not only focusing on a single part is very important. We know in mathematics that the optimal solution of sub-problems does not correspond to the optimal solution of the whole problem. So focusing on the propagation of errors across the whole chain is very important if we're going to have an impact. I think domain expertise is critical, and no machine learning engineer, non-data scientist, non-data AI expert is able to understand the clinical knowledge and the domain knowledge that has been around for almost 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Integrating these models is essential, and this is going to make the AI models more robust. They're going to make them more acceptable, and they're actually going to make them more impactful. The quality of the data is essential. Any problem when you are teaching a kid, a child, if the child has access to poor quality of information, then even if it's a bright one, it's not going to be able successful. So what does count is not the quantity of the data, but what does count is the quality of the data. Following prescriptions, following guidelines, being able to guarantee that actually your methods respect these guidelines, being able to have sufficient amount of data trained with the same guidelines. That's very important. And of course, radiotherapy, but not only radiotherapy, is a very complex domain where in the section of mathematics, imaging, physics, and clinical practice. So for every problem, there should be the right solution. So it's not a straightforward solution. We cannot hope that we're going to be able to address all these problems by looking on off-the-shelf solutions. And by saying that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nikos. Very informative and very specific use cases and some very interesting perspectives for the coming years. Again, for the audience, please ask questions in the chat. I can see a few coming in here, but just before we turn to the chat, just allow me for a few questions here. So we see when we come across different centers that practice and for planning and treatment is very different. How do you see that the automation can be achieved in such a context with different practices?
Yeah, I think that's something that also we faced at the very beginning when we were starting with auto-contouring. People used to say at that time that, but I don't know what you are doing, but our center is exceptional. We have some particular way of doing things. I think there the answer is to follow guidelines. There are specific guidelines that has been published from different societies. Medical Physics Society, Estro Society are actually developing guidelines on how we should treat patients. We do not expect that automation will answer 100% of the cases, but we do expect that when we're looking into acceptable guidelines, there's going to be a sufficient amount of prescriptions or a sufficient amount of consensus across physicians that you eliminate, let's say, 75% of the cases. So I think today there is consensus, but this consensus is applied partially. So it's a question of building models that follow these guidelines. And of course, there will be cases where physician has to make a judgment, and there no AI will be the answer. But for me, the answer is following guidelines, implementing one guideline after another, and giving the physician to the physician and the medical physicist the option through automation. They choose what prescription to what machine, and then it's going to be his own call or her own call once he has access to these plans.
Thanks. And then we also see across the centers that the adoption of adaptive planning is in radiation therapy is lacking today. Do you think that's a clinical or an economical concern?
I think, first of all, there is an economical concern. When we look, for example, today on the solutions that are effectively address adaptive radiotherapy, you need to buy a dedicated machine. This is, for example, the case of Unity from Elekta, or you need to buy a Halcyon with an Ethos solution that is also a dedicated machine with an increased cost. But it's not only that. It's not only that you have to actually invest more time. It's actually the fact that today, even if you have these machines, the time to treatment because of the lack of automation is very high. A typical MR adaptation session varies between 30 minutes to an hour. A typical Ethos adaptation fraction varies from 30 minutes to an hour, which has to be compared with a 15 minutes or 20 minutes of conventional treatment. So we need to reduce the costs, and we need also to make this treatment accessible. The reduction of the cost can only happen if existing infrastructure can deliver adaptive radiotherapy. If you can use existing machines and you don't need a dedicated hardware. The idea is that can software help us to bring to the market or create solutions that will actually compensate the lack of hardware. That's the first thing. And the second thing, which is important, is actually reducing the time that we need to perform these actions, because time is equal to money. So if you are able to treat with adaptive more patients, then most likely it's going to be something that the hospitals will adopt, because now they have to address both the investment for hardware as well as the lack of capacity of treating many patients. So I think there is a clinical need. The clinical need is clearly well identified. There is no question about that. I think the clinical need will now be beyond adaptation. If we're able to do adaptive, we should be able also to reduce margins that we're not doing today. That means lower toxicity. The question is how you can implement it in an efficient way that actually financial and for the hospital or for the interest of the hospital. This goes through software and automation.
Yeah, and you also said quite related that your software is vendor-agnostic, hardware-agnostic, because one of the main challenges today is integration with hardware. How do you address that today?
I think integration is one of the main issues that we have, especially when you have a few vendors dominating the hardware part. As it concerns the offline part, which means auto contouring, auto planning, offline assessment of decision of radiation therapy planning, this is not an issue because you have standard tools like DICOM communication nodes that allows you to communicate with the systems. So today, whatever is related to not treatment delivery, I think there is no issue at all, because there are standard protocols that actually can be used, and these protocols can help you to deliver these components. The question is more complex when we are looking into treatment delivery itself, and then you need to have discussions with vendors. These discussions, depending on the vendor, can be easy or can be complex, but I think at least as of today, if we're able to bring automation even to the pre-planning and the assessment of treatment, that will be already sufficient. But if we want to take this to the next level, we need to establish connections with the vendors because they control the treatment delivery, and this is more complex.
Thanks. And then a question here from Ardo. I think it's more general AI question, whether it will risk-free treatment and outcome and improvements when all patients will get equivalent treatments.
Okay, so I think that's a great question. I think AI at the very beginning, I don't know where this question comes from, but in general, people, they tend to think when we compare AI with the best possible hospital. So for example, in my case, I'm going to try to explain to Gustave Roussy that actually AI is doing as good as Gustave Roussy. Gustave Roussy is a place where they have, and not only Gustave Roussy, this is the case for Charité, that we are there. This is the case for Vienna. This is the case for Munich. This is the case for almost everywhere. These big centers, they have dedicated teams working on different indications. That means that they build in-house expertise that allows you for these sub-indications to create knowledge that can guarantee the quality of the outcome. When you go into another center, which is a much smaller center like in US with one LINAC, the same physician or the same medical physicist has to work on head and neck, has to work on breast, has to work on prostate, has to work on brain tumors. There, what AI will bring first is standardization of treatment. I mean, this is what we call equal access to treatment. So the first objective of AI is not actually to do better than what we do in the best centers. The first objective will be to standardize or propagate best practices from the best centers all over the globe. This is the first objective. But indeed, once you have done that, we're still going to treat the patients the same way by having more efficient tools of doing it. And that's where the next thing will be. And this is what I mentioned at the very beginning. I think the real value of AI is understanding the connection between treatment and outcomes. Today, we're not looking into that. There is no feedback loop in the process. Some patients will actually have adverse cardiac events, and this is one of the projects we're working with Mastro and Gustave Roussy, Unicancer, University of Manchester, trying to understand how treatment affects the patient in terms of treatment response and in terms of lifelong side effects. This is what AI will bring. And once you have done that, you're going to be able to go beyond the step of just standardizing treatment and guaranteeing equal access, actually on individualizing treatment. I think AI is the only way to do it. There is no other way. Whether this is going to happen in a couple of years, it's going to take 10 years, I don't know, but I'm sure it's just a question of time, because radiation oncology, compared to any other field in medicine, is the only field where we have high quality, curated data with concrete outcomes and follow-up. There is no other domain in medicine where you have that.
Great. And then a slightly different question from Kanit here, whether your software have the capability to autonomously generate adaptive treatment plan, or is it necessary to use another treatment planning system in conjunction to create these plans?
Today, the software has the capacity of generating an auto planning. I mean, once you have determined what is the current, whether you need a replanning and you have the current anatomy, and your objectives are fixed to the daily anatomy, then just delivering a plan, you have the dose distribution is straightforward. However, having said that, today the software is not able to communicate live with the accelerator because it is something controlled by the vendor. That means we're not able to get live the data from the accelerator, make the decision for adaptive, and push back to the accelerator a plan. That's not something that we're able to do. So today, what we're focusing is to create a systematic report at the end of the day with all the cases that will be treated, saying that this is where we see discrepancies on the dose distribution, this is where we see discrepancies on the volume changes with respect to the organs or tumor, and this is where we should focus because there is a highest risk of actually increased toxicity at treatment failure. That is the target today due to the lack of communication during the treatment with accelerator.
And related to this, Huiki is asking here how your general AI solution can account for individual machine that does metric characteristic when generating the treatment plans.
So we have a commissioning model for every machine. We are not building an agnostic plans. That means that when you are pushing to the system the prescription and the patient anatomy, you also indicate on what machine will be treated. And the system can provide you plans with different machines. So it's not agnostic to the machine. There is a commission process, light commission process. The parameters of the accelerator, the capacity of accelerator is taken into account. And this is on the optimization plan. We're going to try to fit the dose that was predicted with the dose that is to be delivered. So the answer is, the question is 100% valid. And this is taken into account by delivering models or treatment plans with respect to a specific request on what kind of LINAC and what kind of energies we like to deliver this treatment. This is part of the parameters that the user has to provide to the system.
All right, thanks. And then I think it's the last question we have here for Kirsa Tristan. At what stage levels are uncertainty evaluated in your models, and how are they integrated into the decision-making process, in particular in clinical applications like radiotherapy planning?
Okay, that's a great question, which I think there are two types of answers. There is a first answer, which actually the model themselves today, we are able to associate them what we call with attention maps, we're able to associate them with uncertainties. That means that when you are looking into prediction, you're not only getting a prediction, but you are getting a probability that can be associated with uncertainty. So this is something that can be factored out. That means that we can imagine providing to the user at every stage of the process, because the system itself produces the notion of uncertainty, something that the user can understand where we do feel is uncertain or not. Now the question is how the user can take into account. This can be a focus of attention. For example, when you're looking into contouring, they can say, okay, these are the slices where I don't feel confident enough. But as of today, when looking into products to give a transparent answer, these are internal tools that we're actually using to monitor how well our system generalize, because if you have a system that has high uncertainty when you are testing it, that means that it doesn't generalize well. These are tools that are not part of the product itself. That means that the end user doesn't see them, but these are internal control loops that allow us to guarantee that instead of building something that will work for the 20% of the iceberg, whether it's contouring, whether it's planning, whether it's adaptive, it generalizes well. But I think in the future, and this is going to be something in the near future, all these systems, they need to have their own QA. It's going to be a machine learning QA. That means at some point, it's not going to be just enough providing a solution. We should be able to provide a solution with a clear assessment on how confident we are and where do we think there's a problem. So this is going to be part of the roadmap in general for all AI companies, not only for us. And I think it's going to become a necessity for the near future.
All right, I think that was the last question here. Again, thank you everybody for joining. If you like webinars like this, sign up for our newsletter, Human Bytes AI Academy on LinkedIn, where we will also upload the recorded video of this one. You can share with colleagues or playback if you like. And again, thank you for so many taking 45 minutes here this morning to join Nikos, and feel free to reach out if you like and have other questions or need a demo on your own local cases. So we'll stop the recording here, and thanks again, Nikos, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you as well for participating in the event. Have a great day. Bye.